Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World episode 89. I'm John Jordan and joining me this week is Kieran and Aaron Warwick. How's it going, guys?
Good, thanks, John. How are you?
Good, yes. It's quite exciting. This is the first time had two brothers on the podcast. First time anyone from Australia. So we've had the fun and games with the time zone. It's kind of late for me and early for you. So thanks for getting on.
We can
Zoom.
ask Kane to come on another time, then you'll have three of us.
Yeah, that might be too much, too many Warwicks. So we're going to talk about your project, Illuvium, your kind of interesting mashup of, I guess, of blockchain games, NFTs, some DeFi. You've pretty much, you've got a DAO in there as well. You've pretty much got everything we'd like to have in a blockchain game. Kind of seems to be up and running in there. So we'll get into some details, but I guess before we get into the details, it's always interesting to kind of find how people got into blockchain. And as you have kind of already alluded to, your brother Kane, really well known for basically co-founding and heading the synthetic DeFi DApp, which has been very successful, a way of bringing synthetic assets onto the Ethereum blockchain. And as I read the story, at least, he's been trying to get you guys into blockchain for quite a while, and I don't know whether you resisted. I think you're doing some other things as well, but finally you resisted, or you saw the light, or something like that about a year ago. So is that broadly true? How did you actually how did you get into it?
Yeah, it's fairly accurate. So I was in a business with Kane back in 2016 called Blue Shift, which was the first over-the-counter Bitcoin exchange in the world, I think, or at least in Australia at the time. And so I was in charge of onboarding a lot of the Bitcoin companies that were just starting to emerge, and they wanted a bricks and mortar point of contact where they could start selling their Bitcoins. So I was in that for about a year and a half, and we onboarded 4 or 5 of them. That gave me the exposure to Bitcoin and then eventually Ethereum. I started trading Ethereum, and probably the only person in the world to be trading Ethereum at $8 and actually lose money. But yeah, so that was my start. Then I went and founded a food tech startup, and it was 2-3 years in the running of while I was doing that business. Kane was basically saying, "You're an idiot. Get back into the space. It's blowing up. The crypto winter is over." And so I got into yield farming midway through last year, and I lasted about 3-4 months, and then I started looking at little gaps in the market and seeing, okay, what sort of project could I start myself? I got really immersed in NFTs, and I just saw a massive gap in the market there. And at that point, I started thinking, okay, let's do gaming. We grew up basically playing games constantly, all throughout life. Aaron's got an engineering background. He was making units for Total Annihilation back
1997, I think.
24 years ago or whatever. And so it just made sense to do something with Aaron for the first time. And yeah, so I started looking at the different types of games that we would want to build. I was really, really interested in the collecting nature of people with NFTs. And so for me, I wanted to make a Pokemon style game. Obviously, Aaron wasn't really in that same space growing up. And so when I came to him and I said, "Hey, let's do Pokemon," he was like, "Absolutely not."
I'm 7 years older, so I didn't really hit the Pokemon craze.
Yeah. But one game that we definitely could agree on that we both love to play more recently is Teamfight Tactics.
Yeah.
And so I guess it started off with pitch me on, we'll just leave the Pokemon side of things, the collecting side of things, and we'll just go straight into a Teamfight Tactics style game, which which I obviously, being brothers, we argued about for maybe a week.
Yeah.
And cool. So we decided to meld the two genres together, and that's basically when Illuvium was formed.
Yeah. So I guess my intro to the space was right when Kieran was looking to make a game. Before that, I think the main interest that I had in the blockchain space was a bit more academic. I like the idea of the hash functions, the idea of provable rareness and things like that. I did physics and computer engineering at university. So for me, that was, I guess, more where my interests lied. But like Kieran said, we've always grown up loving games, playing games, making unit packs for games, design and stuff like that. So as soon as he came to me with an idea for a game, I gave him a better idea for a game, and then we merged them together, and I think we've come up with something that is reasonably unique and hopefully people will like.
Yeah, I'd say it's always the interesting thing with when you have because there's quite a lot of brothers in the games industry. It's quite a kind of statistically interesting thing that brothers have founded a lot of successful companies, and it seems to be because they can actually have these quite fierce arguments, and generally they don't kind of fall out because they're brothers. They can't not be brothers. They can be brothers who don't like each other very much or who argue, but actually it kind of seems to be quite a good dynamic. And one of them normally is a bit more kind of technical, one's a bit more kind of design or arty, and they can kind of trust the other one. So it's quite an interesting dynamic, I think, that's kind of already showing, already playing out in this interview. Okay, so we've had you might have noticed we've changed the video there, so we had a few technical issues, but we're going to plow straight ahead. So an interesting bit of news: you guys have announced that you've just raised $5 million. So that's a pretty tidy sum for a game startup in blockchain. I guess there's a lot of money kind of floating around in blockchain in general. NFTs are a big thing. Can you talk a little bit about the process of how you go around raising $5 million? I've never raised $5 million. I don't know if you have before. I don't know how easy it is.
Look, it's obviously raising money at the best of times is still a difficult process. I think we had 47 capital meetings over the space of 3 weeks, which was a lot of fun. But I've raised capital for a few startups prior to this outside of the blockchain. And obviously it helps that we're in a massive bull run at the moment. But the experience that I had with raising money in DeFi, and certainly with the advisors that we have giving us the introductions, it was very, like, I don't want to say it was easy, but it was a lot easier than raising capital outside of DeFi, put it that way.
Okay.
There's a ton of people out there that have made lots and lots and lots of money. There's hundreds of VC firms that have come out of the woodwork because DeFi has exploded so much in the past 12 months. And so usually in a capital raising process, you would have to go out to these investors, you would have to reach out yourself. We literally didn't reach out to a single one. Okay. Which it's like, I even saying this, it makes me feel insane, but that's just how crazy it was. And obviously given that Kane in this space is so influential, that helped a lot, and it gave us a lot of intros and ins and made people think, okay, well, first of all, it's not a scam, they're real people, and if Kane's putting his name on it, then it's probably a legitimate project that they're doing. So it actually wasn't, it was a lot over a very short period, but it wasn't too crazy.
No. So can we go into a bit more detail? You've kind of talked a bit about the concept, the kind of, I guess, the high end vision. Can you go into a bit more about kind of how, what you do as a player in the game, and what kind of kind of game assets you have, and then how that kind of plays into this kind of wider kind of financial aspect, which I guess all blockchains have, but it seems like you've gone quite heavy on that as a feature for the game, rather than it being sort of an afterthought.
Yeah, the main point of the game is that you're trying to hunt these particular type of creatures, which we call alluvials. So we have a number of different regions that are all varying biomes. There's all sorts of different landscapes, things like that. So you run around the world, you hunt them down, and you encounter them, and you battle them. If you win, you have the opportunity to collect them, which is where you actually get them put onto the blockchain as an NFT. And then once you've got a number of them in your team, you can start to play against other players in a PvP situation where your job is to try and outsmart your opponent by putting the right characters down to combat what they're putting down. So from a really core gameplay loop, it's quite simple. It's very similar to other collectible games in that aspect. The difference is that the way that our battles unfold is through an auto battler. So for a lot of people, they would think that an auto battler means that there's no skill, but actually it just shifts the skill from being like who can click the fastest and who has the best reaction times to a thinking game where you have to basically play it like chess. The genre, is commonly referred to as auto chess. Yeah. So your job is to make sure that you have a decent team that synergizes together and is able to defeat your opponents. There's a few other mechanics in the game. We have mining built into the game and fusion. So as you start to collect the characters, you can combine 3 of them together to make a more powerful form. So there is a lot of valid reasons for catching the same one repeatedly, as well as catching different ones so that you can make a team that works together to help you win the battle.
So from what you're saying, it's you're kind of there's the kind of the collection part. You're going around trying to find these things, and once you collect them or capture them, whatever, then that's when they're actually being minted. So if I'm right, you're using the layer 2 solution from Immutable. So it's the Immutable X is the technology, isn't it? And that's the Gods Unchained team. So so I guess there's no gas fees involved in that. So it's quite an interesting thing in the sense that people are going around and they're actually kind of generating the NFTs in the game themselves. So I imagine that's probably quite a attractive thing for players to actually be getting something that is on the blockchain, because often these free-to-play games is you're getting characters that aren't on the blockchain because it's so expensive to mint them. So
yeah, that was one of the big issues that we had when we first started out, is the gas fees were going to be quite high, and we didn't want to step into the space until there was some way to solve that, because in the end there's a whole bunch of experiences that you can put into a game that rely around having lots of variety, having lots of different combinations that you can choose from, quick transaction times. No one really wants to spend 15 seconds or 20 seconds waiting for a particular thing to happen. And also the economy of the game gets massively ruined when every single transaction is requiring you something that is $10, $15. So you want to be able to offer a spread of NFTs over a range of different price points. And in our game, they go from 0. There are free NFTs that you can collect in the game, all the way up to, we don't know what the eventual pricing of these things will be, but we imagine it'll probably be quite high because we have some things in the game that are incredibly rare. And so it gives a price point for everyone. Anyone who gets into the game can get in there quickly. They can learn it. They can understand all of the different mechanics before they even put a cent into the game, which I think is something that's missing from a lot of the current titles. And they're starting to realize it and coming up with different solutions and different ways to either minimize gas or minimize transaction times. And we just didn't want to do anything unless we had that solved from the beginning. That's where we started.
It just wouldn't have.
IMX.
It just wouldn't have been possible. There's way too many mechanics in the game, little things that, you know, travel fees where people are going around, and if there was that blocker of time and then also money every single time as additional fees, it just wouldn't have been feasible for the game that we're trying to build.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to get into too much detail on the features, but I'll just go back to one thing you said there. So when I capture these, it might be that I'll be paying a fee depending on how rare the NFTs that I've captured will be. Is that right?
Not exactly. No, the way that it works. If you wanted to use a Pokemon analogy, we have a thing called a shard, which is the equivalent to a Pokeball.
Okay.
That's something that you have to purchase first. You don't do it at the time of the encounter.
Right.
So when you go out into the region, you have to effectively find these things, like literally mine them. The shards are actually mined on the ground. Okay. That doesn't cost you anything, but the finishing of the shard does cost a fee depending on what type of shard you found. Right. If you find something that is incredibly rare and incredibly powerful, it'll cost a little bit more to mint it, but you would use that on a more rare alluvial that you find in the wild, because when you get into that encounter, if it fails, there's a chance that it can then escape. Obviously, you don't want that. So if you're fighting against something that's a little bit less rare, you might use a slightly weaker shard and be willing to risk whether or not it gets away. So yeah, there's no fee at the time of capture. It's more something that you have to preload and go out into the world with a certain amount of, and that's up to you. That's sort of part of the strategy.
Yeah. Okay.
And obviously, obviously the stronger the alluvial that you encounter, the better the shard that you want to use. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that risk factor there, that if you can get extremely lucky and cure a shard that doesn't attract many fees, but if you go and use that against a Ramfire, which is our equivalent of a Charizard, a very powerful alluvial, there's a much higher chance that that's going to flee.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got the NFT things. I can kind of visualize that in my head. You've also got a token in there. Can you talk a little bit about how the token works and how that then feeds into the DeFi side of things? Because you've also got a synthetic version of that token and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. So it at its core, it does two things. The first one is it acts as a governance token. So that was being decentralized. One thing that we set up very, very early on was a council. And so that was a community elected council. And the way that works is you need to be holding what is now a pre-ILV token that will soon be ILV. And that will allow you to essentially elect who you want to the council. Those council members then get to deliberate and decide on any changes to the protocol. For example, our marketplace fees at this time we've set at 5%. Mm-hmm. If for whatever reason the community decided that that's too high, someone could write a proposal, and the council could then basically approve that proposal and say, okay, we think it's too high, let's change it from 5% down to 4%.
Yep.
The second thing is obviously when you're staking your ILV, you have it's yield farm. So essentially you're earning yield with that ILV, but you also have the ability to use those yield farmed rewards as in-game rewards. And that's the SILV component of the token. And if you take up the SILV as opposed to claiming it just as ILV, you can use that immediately in-game. So we're really incentivizing people with the way that our yield farming works is the token, if you take it in ILV, it's locked for a period of 12 months and you can't get around that. But if you take it as SILV, which we're assuming a lot of our gaming stakers are going to do, you can effectively start playing immediately with rewards instead of, your own additional.
So you've kind of cleverly solved the issue of having a governance token and a utility payment token, which a lot of games have two tokens. You basically have solved that by having a synthetic version, which is much more elegant.
Correct.
And the people choose how to use that. That's pretty cool. Okay. In terms of kind of what's coming up, obviously the game is a bit of a way off, but you're launching the token at the end of this month, I believe. So can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about how you decided to launch a token? Because there's lots of different ways you can launch a token. Obviously, you can go and launch it on Binance if you want. That seems quite popular at the moment. You've chosen not to do that. Can you explain?
Yeah, so a lot of this discussion was with Kane originally, and we're very much of the belief of a fully decentralized game, and we wanted the exact same experience with our distribution. We wanted it to be as fair as possible. The mechanics of a balancer sale, we believe, allow that to occur the best, I guess, out of all the other solutions. We obviously had the ability to go with something like a Binance, or even just go straight with Uniswap. But the possibility of being, we've created a lot of hype around our launch. And one thing that we don't want is bots front running our community members. We want them to have a fair chance at saying, the way that the balancer sale works is it starts really high, and if no one buys, it slowly starts ticking down. Aaron's got a pretty funny analogy of a simplified version of how it works, but essentially it starts ticking down, and when people believe that it's hit a fair price, that's when they can purchase it, and that's when it'll slowly start ticking back up. And you reach this equilibrium where it's demand is met, and people believe, okay, this is now a fair price, and that might be 2 days, 3 days into the sale. But essentially what we're trying to do is allow people to buy at what they believe is fair market value.
And reduce their gas costs by stopping the need for a gas war where everyone's buying all at the same time. You can buy at whatever point you want. Yeah, the token price it'll be a little bit like Flappy Bird. It's always falling, but then every time someone buys, it's just going to tap it back up. And it'll find a particular balance that will work for everyone's individual risk profile.
No, that's good, because I think it is a very difficult thing to price a token of a new project, or to price a share of a company as well. I mean, you can just see have these examples of people getting stuff horribly wrong, and it can go horribly wrong kind of either way. You can go horribly wrong being priced too low or priced too high, and having a dynamic system, I guess, allows people who are really bullish on your project can go in early and they think it's gonna be worth a lot, and people who don't can maybe wait to see. So that sounds good. So that's launching on the. Go ahead.
Sorry, one of the other good things with our protocol is that we don't just have yield farming, but we also have the vault distributions, which is set at 100%. So I think the actual token price itself becomes a little bit less important when people know that they're going to be getting a steady sort of distribution from the in-game purchases. And we feel that will take away a little bit of the uncertainty in what people are going to be getting as far as yield goes over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So that's launching on Balancer on the 30th of March. I guess I think you'll be doing some more kind of a communication around that at the time. In terms of kind of where the game is at the moment, I don't know how long you've been working on it. I guess now you've raised $5 million, I'm sure there's kind of a sort of a hiring sort of thing you want to go through as well. But can you kind of tell us a bit about kind of where the game is in its current stage, and where you hope to be by the end of the year or whenever?
Yeah. So the game originally started, we were doing it in Unity. That was back in December. And we decided quite quickly, and this has been the case with all of our decisions, is if something's painful, but it's the best decision to make, let's just do it. And we've done that all the way through. So we decided to change to Unreal so that we could make it a little bit easier for us to hit the graphical quality that we were hoping to get out of it. Our lead artist is incredibly demanding in terms of quality of the graphics, in terms of the fidelity of everything. So if it has to be perfect, then it has to be perfect. And we feel like the best way to do that is through Unreal. So that development started in the beginning of January, and we've been pushing on through there. We have a gameplay demo, sort of like a gameplay trailer that's coming out maybe in a few hours. It could be, it depends on when this video drops, but it might even be out by the time.
I just got a bit of a preview of it, and I think it's going to be maybe 24 hours. So I'm not sure when you're posting the video, but it may already be out.
Might be out already.
Yeah. Yeah. So we spent a decent amount of our time trying to work out how to get all of the different features included into the game. Now, as soon as the demo is released, we'll go back and look if there's any sort of restructuring that is required. We don't believe that there'll be much. And then, like you said, we're probably going to hire another 10 to 15 people. We currently have about, I think, just over 40.
So 40 already?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we took the approach of, I knew that we could raise the money in the space. There was just so much going on. So we took a little bit of a risk in bootstrapping it with Aaron and myself early on. And, you know, Aaron was sort of pushing back a little. He's a little bit more conservative than I am. And as I was bringing on more and more and more people saying we need to, you know, keep on going, he's sort of going, all right, I don't know if we should go this hard so early, but in the end, it worked out quite well because we did end up getting the funding. So we were already in a position to deliver something of really, really good quality. But now, given that we have closed this round officially and the balance of sale is coming up, we're definitely in a position to continue to grow the number of people we have on the project. And
is that a team you've kind of brought together that's new, or have you kind of acqui-hired kind of existing people who knew each other? Because it's obviously building a game is pretty hard, but building a team is also hard. So the combination of the two things, the first game for a new team is quite difficult.
Yeah, look, it's both of us weren't officially in the gaming space. Our art director hasn't been in the gaming space either, but he's been in the industry, and so it's kind of worked out that we hire someone who has been in a really high up position in a studio, and then they go, oh, actually, Kieran, I know XYZ person. Right. I reckon he'd be great at texturing or animation or whatever. And so it's sort of grown in a little bit of enclosed networks across the board. Okay. So there's clusters of people that have worked together before, but effectively it is a brand new team. And with what's going on with the pandemic at the moment, obviously we're in the same city, but pretty much every other core contributor is around the world.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. And in terms of what we've seen with quite a few blockchain games is they've sort of segmented themselves, and they've sort of got say like one bit out, and then like 6 months later they'll add like another component, and then maybe a year later they'll add another component. Is that the way you're thinking of delivering, or are you thinking much more that when you launch something, it's going to be obviously games develop over time, but there's going to be a pretty sizable chunk of what you expect to deliver?
Yeah, the main goal is the story that we've built into the game requires it to be released over time.
Okay.
But the mechanics of the game aren't part of that. So there's been other games that have released as just NFTs and then sort of added gameplay on top of it. That won't be the route that we take. When it launches, you'll have access to the majority of it. We probably will have a slight delay between the PvP element and the collection elements just because there won't be a heap of people that have the required teams to be able to fight. But it's not going to be a long lead time, because the battles that you do in the wilds are fundamentally almost identical to the battles you would do in PvP. They're the same auto battler technology. So it'll all be there ready to go. The things that will be released over time would be extra regions. And there's a story element as to why those regions aren't available straight away. And we've tried to build that in from the start so that it does make sense. We don't want there to be a whole bunch of loose ends in the game as to why gameplay mechanics are what they are. After we release the PvP and release all of the regions of the game, there will be a period where everyone can go around collecting and capturing. The difficulty of capturing will go up over time on a type of bonding curve, which will make the stronger things in the game a little bit more rare, which means that the people that get in at the start will probably have a slight advantage in terms of collecting, I guess, more valuable things. But at some point, there will be a stop, and that will actually be determined by the player base, not through a vote, but through gameplay mechanics. And at that point, there's not going to be any way to capture what we're calling the Genesis alluvials. So set one will effectively be done. If you own them, great. That's how many there will be. If you don't, the only way that you'll be able to get them will be to buy them from the Illuvidex, which is our marketplace. And then we have a lot of other things going on in the background, such as additional games that we might be able to release over time. Because one of the best things about NFTs is they're owned by the people who own them rather than by the game or the project itself. So we want to allow people to play a whole variety of different games. So we're starting the very early stages of development of some additional gameplay that people might be able to do, because not everyone is going to like an auto battler style game. They might not like the collectible side. They might just want to buy them and go and play a variety of different games that we are thinking. I won't go into any details now, but that is the next plan.
But just to add to that, when the Genesis set finishes, that's when we're going to be looking to introduce our second set of characters. And the way that we see it is it will continue to grow, and part of how we're going to keep people interested in the game is continually adding those character sets. Whether or not they'll be the same amount of characters that we're launching in Genesis, which is going to be somewhere between 100 and 150.
Okay.
We don't know, but there's going to be some additional sets that come. Maybe they're 50 new alluvials or whatever.
So it's a pretty there's a vision for a game, and then there's a vision for the kind of what comes next with the NFTs, which is, it's one of those things that people have spoken about in blockchain games for, I've been in it for 3 years, and that's always one of these big kind of features that everyone talks about, interoperability, but really we've never very rarely seen any examples, and they've not been very coherent examples, and I guess the one way you would get a coherent kind of use of a character or an NFT is if the developer who originated the NFT was the one behind sort of the other games and kind of kick-started that. And I think that's what we've lacked. So it's kind of interesting you say that.
I think that there will be other ones that come out that do a good job of it. One of the reasons why we started heavily with the story element of the game is so that we could provide a backdrop of a universe where different games make sense. So from that perspective, us being the developer of it gives us a slight advantage, but there's a lot of creativity out there in the community, and I'm sure we'll see a ton of people looking to do community-based projects for a number of different protocols that will probably turn out fantastic.
Good. Excellent. Well, I think for our introduction to what you guys are up to, this has been a really good podcast. I'm sure we can come back and as things progress, we can get into a bit more detail as playables become available and that sort of thing. But thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the ability to sort out your the AV problems. That's good, and you came back again, so that's helpful.
Awesome.
No worries. Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having us.
John.
And
Talk to you
thank you guys for listening and or watching. Every week or so, we are talking to the people who are kind of building out this crazy new world of blockchain games. I personally find it fascinating. I think everyone's coming in with their own slightly different vision of what they think is going to be the sweet spot, and we're just going to really finding out this year, what that's going to be. So, hope you find it useful. Be great if you can give us a review on the especially if you're on the podcast. That's helpful for other people to find us, and subscribe obviously via YouTube or your podcast channel of choice. But thanks for listening, and I come back next time to find out what's going on in the world of blockchain games.